This is Common Ground. I'm your host, Sonja Wolf, and with me today is Romain Le Cour Grandmaison. He's a senior expert with the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. That is an organization that has done research on Haiti. And Romain is with us today to talk about Haiti's security crisis. Hi, Romain. Welcome.
Hi, Sonja. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. So we're going to talk, as I said, about Haiti's security crisis, which is a situation that has increasingly worsened. Some analysts call it an unprecedented security crisis. So this is the security crisis revolves around gang violence, which has also led to the displacement of civilians. And as a fairly novel development, an international security mission has been deployed to Haiti. Kenya and other nations participate in this UN-backed mission. And I would like to talk to you about Haiti's country context and the gangs and the impact they have had in Haiti. So let's start with Haiti's country context. Could you talk a little bit about what the current situation in Haiti is in terms of politics, institutions, the economic situation also?
Yes, absolutely. I guess the way you have presented it gives a very good sense of the fact that, of course, the security crisis that Haiti is seeing right now is both the product of very recent developments and new trends and new dynamics of violence, but also long-standing political dynamics, economic dynamics, institutional dynamics, and also the way the state and the private sector have been interacting with violent groups in the past. I think what we see in a way is the long evolution again of the relationships and the networks that existed between the political power, violent groups on the ground that were able to use violence on behalf of others for many political or economic reasons, organizing rallies or mobilizations, repressing the same mobilizations and rallies, making sure that you win an election, making sure that you win a market, making sure that you control territory, etc., which is, quite classic in a way, unfortunately, in many countries. And at the same time, you have this evolution of violence that comes into play with the past 10, 15 years in Haiti that have seen, natural catastrophes. The earthquake, of course, has set a very, very dire panorama for the country, both in terms of humanitarian crisis and economic relief, and then the political crisis that have been going unfortunately on and on over the past 5 to 10 years. It's been 10 years since the country has had elections. The last president has been assassinated, Jovenel Moïse. And the country has not had any election or president since then because of, again, the conjunction of security crisis, institutional crisis, political crisis, and economic crisis. So it's a kind of the perfect storm, if you wish, of how unfortunately the country is immersed in the crisis we see today.
It seems there's quite a large number of gangs currently operating in Haiti. Some are larger than others, perhaps more well connected also to the political class. Could you talk a little bit about the gangs that currently exist in Haiti and how did they emerge?
You do have, according to the UN, I think you have around 200 gangs that operate in Haiti, which is a lot, of course. But as you said, within this very large amount of gangs that operate in Haiti, you have multiple profiles of gangs and gang leaders. You have very small cells of people, small groups of people, maybe even 10, 15, 20 people tops. Men, usually young men, including children or teenagers, that are part of a gang, who will run a couple of blocks, who will, do petty crime, who will provide services to larger groups, etc., etc., etc. So you have those small groups that are probably a fair number of gangs in Haiti. Then you have a larger groups of gangs in which you have more men, more firepower as well, probably more weapons, and more ability to use them, more territorial control, or the ability at least to provide services into wider areas, to larger groups, or again political or economic patrons for which you can work for, and those are probably, I would say, the vast majority of gangs. Like you have maybe 50 to 100 members, tops, the ability again to control territory, to extort the population, extract resources from the population and the local businesses, maybe run small kidnappings operations, small smuggling and trafficking networks. And this is again like what happens in Port-au-Prince, but also in the provinces more and more, where you have like quite large gangs that operate. And then you probably have I would say the like top 20, 25 gangs in the country that have, from a couple of hundreds to maybe a couple of thousands members. Some of them have the ability to control very vast territories today, have access to very good firearms and ammunitions. They have trained soldiers, quote unquote, as gang members, although they also use more and more childs and teenagers to populate the gangs. They have the ability probably to control more territory and therefore like better extortion and protection racket schemes. So they make much more money. They have the ability to run much more complex kidnappings activities as well. They have the ability to get into international trafficking, weapons, ammunition, drugs. Absolutely, for sure. Control of the borderlands and the border with the Dominican Republic for a large extent of them. And when you go to the top like 5-10 groups, those are like the most sophisticated one in terms of bureaucracy, organization, the ability to control the territory, the population, and to enforce rules, norms, governance rules. And when they're really well organized and well organized and quite sophisticated, they have the ability to become what they are right now, which is a mix between a very criminal and a very political and economic actor that has the ability to influence the course of the political life in the country. So you have this very, again, like a large array of gang members and gang actors and gang groups in Haiti, to the extent that a number of people call for a different term, actually, to call them. Is it really gang? Is it more like militia type violence? Is it more like armed groups, and in the way they organize and the way they behave? So there is a current debate that I think is really important to have in mind, also in order to be able to grasp the differences between the gangs and their activities and profiles and sizes, of course.
The gangs have different kinds of relationships with other criminal groups, with the private sector, also with the political class. But what is behind this shift from groups that were once perhaps more politically motivated to groups that are now more profit oriented?
I think the groups have always been very, very deeply politically and economically connected to put it briefly, to the national elites, basically. Especially because most of if you take like the top groups, gang leaders actually come from the system. Like a number of gang leaders are ex-police officers, for example, that started, behaving roguely for multiple interests and multiple patrons, but they were still police officers, and then they ended up becoming like full-time gang leaders. A number of gang leaders were militants or political operators as well, so they know the terrain, they know the political field. They know how the system works and how to work, for example, as brokers between different groups, different categories of actors, different bosses as well. And I think what happened is not necessarily that the gangs are more profit oriented today, is probably the fact that the political and economic spheres have, to a certain extent, much less to offer to them. And they have had less to offer to them over the past, I would say, 2, 3, 5 years, because the political life in Haiti and elections, for example, have not been happening. So you don't have an economic and political calendar that is, organized throughout and around the elections the way it used to be. And I think this has been a massive, massive disruption to the relationships between the gangs and their potential bosses. The fact that you don't have elections anymore dries up the political market, basically, because you have to go on your own. You don't have elections to compete. And I think it's been a massive, massive change in Haiti. The fact that the gangs have had access to firearms and suddenly less, controlled by their former bosses, and less the criminal organizations started, and their leaders actually started feeling, I don't fully need to obey the orders of someone else right now, so I can go more independent, more autonomous. And this is absolutely what they did to get money out of much more extortion and protection racket, which is incredibly sophisticated and well organized and expanded in Haiti today. Kidnappings, run like almost as an industry over the past couple of years. Now it's down, but it's been literally a criminal industry. Firearms trafficking, drug trafficking that provide vast amount of resources to the gangs. So basically, you have much more violent and economically powerful actors that suddenly craft their own space within the political and economic system. But nevertheless, what we see today is that it's not the fact that the gangs have gone fully independent from economic and political actors. It's more the fact that you have a much more balanced relationship, or at least a much more, let's say, face-to-face, even relationship to a certain extent between the gangs that used to obey, and now they don't necessarily obey all the time. But it's still like a very, very tight and articulated network of actors. It's not like the gangs have gone fully independent and that the political and economic bosses, they don't have power anymore. It's just that those relationships are probably more unstable and harder to regulate than ever. And they have become much, much, much more violent than before. And right now, I think what we see is not necessarily, the competition for power or a civil war, or the fact that the gangs are becoming insurgents, or they're looking for, a political alternative. I think what they want is the best space within the system, and not against the system. But the thing is, to carve your best space within the system right now, you will need violence, basically, and you will fight for it. And you will fight to control more territory, more resources, and more power. And this is what the gangs have been able to do also, because of the creation of the gang coalition last year, and the fact that they're now unified under one common front.
We hear much about the capital city, Port-au-Prince. Is this where the gangs are concentrated, or have you seen the gangs spread throughout Haiti? Where can we find the gangs nowadays?
It's mainly an issue of the capital still. The gangs are really, really concentrated in Port-au-Prince. I would say 70-80% of the gangs are concentrated in the capital. When we say the capital, it's the metropolitan area of Port-au-Prince. So it's a bit larger than the capital. And this is where roughly 50-55% of the national population is located as well. So this is basically where you have the heart of economic and population power. Haiti is a very centralized state institutionally. So political power, economic power is really, really concentrated in Port-au-Prince, and the gangs are there as well. The gangs basically right now control more or less the entire critical infrastructure, private and public, in the country. And when I say control, it's not necessarily that they run it fully, but they have a deep influence onto how the ports are operating, how merchandise are moving, coming in and out, how moving throughout the country as well. And they have the ability, honestly, to dictate the tempo of violence and security, and the tempo of how the country is actually operating. Nevertheless, you do have first the expansion of Port-au-Prince gangs outside of the capital, on the surroundings of the metropolitan area of Port-au-Prince, and now you have many more gangs in the central plateau of the country, going north, where you've had gangs for some times, or armed groups, armed militias for some time, but the gangs have been expanding quite a lot towards the center, the north, and the roads that connect Haiti to the Dominican Republic, which is basically the other half of the island.
The way you describe it, we get the sense that the gangs are able to influence important infrastructure, also roads in the country. What is life like for the civilian population in certain territories when we think of access to public services, for example, perhaps mobility restrictions, and also the sheer impact of the violence?
The impact on civilians is terrible. I mean, the security crisis that has been hitting Haiti for the past 3-5 years, and especially for the past 18 months, I would say, has a massive impact on civilian lives. It's first homicides and violence, like very concrete violence, that has been skyrocketing for the past years. Now, I think 2024 is record year for homicide rates. If I'm not mistaken, it's around like 46, 47 per 100,000 inhabitants or something, which is the record for the country. You have 1 million plus IDPs in the countries. It's roughly 9% of the national population, which is currently internally displaced because of the violence. You have a very systemic and rampant use of gender and sexual violence by the gangs and by violent groups to impose domination on a number of territories. And then if you live under gang domination, I would say for the vast majority of the territories on which the gangs have under their control right now, you can't have a normal life. I mean, you can't exit the territory without them authorizing you to do it. You can't choose whether you leave normally or don't. You have probably to pay them something to operate normally. You need them to have access to humanitarian aid, for example, if you have some. And you honestly have access to almost none of the public services that the Haitian state still offers. So if you live under fully dominated gang rule, you're basically cut off from the rest of the country. Under other circumstances and other criminal groups, you can move or more or less freely, and you can go, in and out of gang zones. But it's very, very hard for you not to fall under gang domination anyways, and you never know what's gonna happen tomorrow morning. For example, if the gangs are gonna turn up against the population for some reason, start again, like just killing people, raping people, displacing you, burning your house, taking your house, and so on and so forth. And right now, the gangs probably control between 85% and 90% of the capital and the metropolitan area. So it's basically daily life dictated by the gangs, whether you live under gang domination or you live in the rest of the country. Violence has an impact on you because of the economic crisis that the violence has brought. IDPs again, the fact that you can't travel anymore, you can't get out of the country anymore, you can't move around without going through gang checkpoints. Your life is at risk almost all the time, and it's been the way daily life has been unfortunately unfolding and organizing around violence and the way gangs operate.
It's clear that the life of citizens is heavily impacted by gang violence. What does the presence of the gangs mean for the work of certain sectors? And I'm thinking specifically of organized civil society groups, but also journalists.
It's getting worse and worse. If you run a Haitian civil society organization, and your job and your work and your mission had been deployed in certain areas that have become under gang control, it's very likely that you can't work anymore. It's very, very likely that you can't go to those territories safely anymore, that if you had an office there, you don't have an office anymore. It's very likely that a huge part of your personnel is under threat as well. So many people just don't want to come to work anymore. It's very likely that you have lost part of your activities, your operation, and which probably means that you have lost parts of your revenue as an NGO. At the local level, you've had hundreds of thousands of Haitians that have decided to leave the country over the past years as well. So you have a massive drain of, I would say, middle class workers and people that were educated, that took the opportunity to leave, especially to the US or Canada, for example, and that are probably never coming back, and at the short term at least. So you had this, and you're under direct threat by the gangs that someday might feel that you're giving information to a rival group or to the government or to the police. Because you operate in their turf, you have to follow their rules, but you never know what's going to happen with the rules. If they say it's okay for you to work, you don't know if it's still the case tomorrow. And unfortunately, it's the same for journalists that have become a direct target for the gangs to influence, of course, the way they work. Make sure that you don't publish something that threaten the gangs and then the gang leaders, but also what the journalists are complaining about more and more is the pressure that might come from politics, from economic powers as well, and the fact that being a journalist in Haiti right now is probably one of the most dangerous work and jobs to have. So you have a massive diminution of the number of journalists operating in the country. Same as for NGOs and CSOs, especially locals, which takes civil society participation and civil society initiatives to a minimal level right now. I mean, you still have lots of people working in CSOs and trying to, find the energy, the resources, the money, and the people to keep on working, but it's harder than ever before for civil society.
Early on in the podcast, you mentioned internally displaced persons. We also know that Haitians try to migrate to other countries, for example, the Dominican Republic, countries such as Mexico and the United States. But at the same time, we know that Haiti is a very small country, and in the region, there is perhaps growing hostility towards irregular migrants, and the Trump administration in the United States has announced that it wants to step up deportations. So it seems Haitians are caught between the security crisis at home and the need to find safety elsewhere, but at the same time, they're often not welcome in these other places. So what can Haitians do, or what are they trying to do?
I think you've presented it perfectly. I mean, over the past years, you've had a number of humanitarian programs that would allow Haitians, to a certain extent and under very specific conditions, to emigrate to the US and Canada, for example, in a relative safe manner. It's what Haitians called the Biden program, and this is what drove, again, like probably tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of Haitians to leave, right? I mean, make sure that they have the money available and they have their relatives already settled and installed in the US and Canada, and make sure that they can take their family and just go. This right now has been, very, very hard and then almost suspended. It's very, very hard first because unfortunately the gangs have targeted commercial planes in and out of the Port-au-Prince airport in November of 2024. So right now you don't have any commercial plane coming or leaving Port-au-Prince. The airport is open, but no commercial company is allowed to fly in and out. So the city is surrounded by gangs and gang checkpoints, and you can't leave the city by air if you're like a normal citizen. You can only do so if you have the ability to pay for helicopters to take you out, or if you're able to run and fly on UN and humanitarian flights, basically. But that's it. So you can't leave anymore. And then, as you said, there is a very, very complicated relationship and diplomatic relationship between Haiti and the DR, the Dominican Republic. You have hundreds of thousands of Haitians living and working in the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic keeps on, expelling and deporting Haitian workers and Haitian migrants. Although, as the US, to that extent, the countries know that this is expelling and deporting people to a country in which they will probably find a darker crisis than the one they left, right? So it's not only very harsh on, of course, the Haitians that get deported, it's probably also somehow I'm not an expert, but it's to a certain extent probably a violation of rules and laws on how you can deport and where you can deport people to, right? So what you have right now is the only option available for Haitians is either you can reach out to the Dominican Republic and you try to make it to the other side and see what you can do in the Dominican Republic, or you get most likely displaced internally. And this is what's happening in Port-au-Prince. Like the largest numbers of internally displaced people are in Port-au-Prince now. And you have displacement from one neighborhood to another one. And it keeps on moving because the gangs keep on pushing and controlling more territory. And when they come in your neighborhood, it is quite likely that they will burn down, destroy the houses, take everything, loot everything, destroy, and make sure that you actually can't come back. So people are displaced within the city, within the capital. Sometimes they can be displaced just, a couple of blocks away. But we're talking, again, like hundreds of thousands of people that get displaced multiple times, like even multiple times a year or multiple times a month, because you keep on being pushed by the gangs. But honestly, right now you can't flee, basically.
The gangs have a complicated relationship with the political class or also with the security sector, but it's still the responsibility of Haiti, of the state, to respond to the security crisis. So in terms of government policy, but also law enforcement, what has the country tried to do?
I mean, it is very, very complicated, and it is a very complex situation in which you have the national police of Haiti, which honestly does not have the men, the equipment, the training, and the ability to fully counter the gangs today. First, because the police has lost probably more than half of the force, with policemen that left the force and then left the country as well. The force has lost, of course, people and officers and agents at combat. Like lots of officers have been killed by gangs in shootings and violence and reprisals. And right now, the police force again does not have the human capacity to actually fight back. And this is what the gangs know. Like the gangs outnumber the police. The gangs have better weapons, more weapons and more ammunitions for sure. And they have the ability to fight like day and night during days, which is something that the police do not have. The gangs have the ability to open multiple fronts simultaneously. They can run attacks, in 3, 4, 5 different areas of Port-au-Prince at the same time, and the police does not have the human or technical capacity to replicate. And it's been like this for so many years that you have a force that is so exhausted that more agents, just drop down, try to again leave the force, leave the country, or at least say, I'm not fighting. I'm not fighting anymore. You still have like this constant sacrifice, honestly, by the remaining police to fight back and try to push back. You have new cohorts of police agents that have been trained and that have come out of the police academy over the past 6 to 8 months. So it's a progress in a way, but we're still very, very far from the level and the state of a police institution that can really do something significant against the gangs today. Not to mention, of course, the issues of corruption within the police that have been, quite well documented as well, be it, direct collusion and work with the gangs, or the ability of the police and rogue police officers to work for drug trafficking or firearms trafficking as well. So you have a massive issue of, something that is not very original in the Caribbean or Latin America, which are all the issues of vetting within the police, transparency within the police, training and honesty within the force.
The international community has a long history in Haiti. We might say it's even a controversial history, especially when we look at the involvement of the United Nations. At the moment, what is the response of the international community? What are the main activities, and what are the challenges you perceive?
As you said, I mean, the international community's involvement, both from the UN and the US, basically, which are like the top actors in Haiti, to be honest, has a long history, and it's not like a very simple and fully clean history. Right now, what you have is quite complicated because I would say the international community's involvement in Haiti is like threefold. You have the humanitarian aid and the massive humanitarian programs that are trying to, provide food and support to the population that is suffering from violence. So this is one massive part of the international community's involvement. The second one is the regime of sanctions on Haiti, which is supposed to target, any actor, especially political or economic actors that still back, fund, or support the gangs in any activity. The sanctions are supposed to go after those actors and make sure that they're out of the business, and that's supposed to be true for the gang leaders as well. Although the sanctions have been in place for a bit more than a year and a half, we don't see the impact of international sanctions in Haiti, and especially dismantling the relationship between gangs and their political and economic bosses, right? And the third pillar of the international intervention right now is a strange mandate for a strange multilateral force, which is the support mission, the multilateral support mission that has been deployed in Haiti after a long period of negotiations in June 2024. And it's a force that is it's not a peacekeeping operation. It's not a UN force, but it's still under Chapter 7 of the Security Council. So it's a mix between multiple things. It's not fully funded by the UN. So, countries have to come in and put money into a trust fund to actually fund the MSS, the MSS force. The force has been and is being led by Kenya, with other countries pitching agents and police forces coming from. Right now, it's basically Jamaica, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Kenya. deploying forces on the ground. But the MSS has been very, very poorly funded, actually, because of this strange scheme of institutionality. It has equipment problems, logistics problem, funding problems, and honestly, a very, very weak operational and strategic mandate that, from our perspective, has not been, helping the force to actually accomplish the mission, which is its task, which is basically to support the local police to fight back the gangs and regain territory. It's not been happening. The force has been deployed for almost 8 months now, a bit less, 7-8 months, and we don't see a critical progress. On the contrary, and unfortunately, the gangs are probably more powerful than ever right now.
In this final part of the episode, I would like to ask for a reflection from you about the outlook for Haiti. So we know that Haiti has multiple challenges that are long-standing, that are complex, and there's no quick fix to the situation. What can Haiti do? What can the international community do to perhaps achieve more significant improvements, for example, when it comes to security and justice, or to anti-corruption programs, or even to social programs? And I ask also in the current context, because the Trump administration has announced cuts to its foreign aid, and it seems that the security support mission in Haiti will also be affected by this funding cut. So, looking at this picture, what do you think is the future for Haiti? What does it look like at the moment, and what solutions or responses do you envisage for the country?
I think, of course, notwithstanding the political context and what could happen, I think that the first thing is we really need to do much more in understanding what's the nature and the logics of violence and gang violence in Haiti. Like we don't fully understand what's happening, to be honest, and we don't fully understand the nature of gangs, the nature of criminal groups, the nature of their interactions with political and economic actors. Still, we need to push for it. We need to better understand again what's the logic of violence, and what's the type of conflict that Haiti is in. There is a massive need for more research, more sources, and more strategic thinking and policy thinking around what's in front of us in terms of a crisis and how to deal with it. I think the diagnosis is not good enough in Haiti. The second one is really, unfortunately, our inability to generate more political attention and political will to actually tackle such a type of crisis. At the Global Initiative, we truly think that what's happening in Haiti is unfortunately a trend in international conflict and international violence, in which you have this mix of extreme violence, illicit economies, criminal actors, corrupt officials, and corrupt private sector as well, that create these intractable crises that look more and more as the future of conflict, if you wish, to a certain extent, and it's happening in many other places right now. Unfortunately, of course, the international system and the international arena right now is, for very logic and legitimate reasons, focused on other wars and other topics. Haiti is quite forgotten, to be honest. And this lack of attention at the international stage is not helping anything. It's not helping the international community to react. Then at the very local level, the main challenge right now is years passing by, the impossibility to rebuild institutions and institutional life, the impossibility to make sure that the authorities actually work together on a common agenda towards not only the design of a public strategy for public security, which is lacking, honestly, but also the design of a public security on justice, on social programs, on education, on public health, like going back to a more normal institutional life has been absolutely impossible because, of course, yes, the Haitian institutions probably do not have the resources to do it on their own. So they need the support of the international community to do so. But there is also a very, very high level of internal fighting and political fighting in Haiti that makes it almost impossible to reach progress on the long run. And this is also why you haven't seen elections in almost 10 years now. It's now or never, I would say, in terms of trying to rebuild a level of institutional life that would take slowly the country back to a normal track of institutions. And then when you mix all this between, security and politics and economic crisis and humanitarian crisis and the international community, right now, unfortunately, it's very, very hard to sit everybody around the same table and make sure that the international community actually, helps and brings like full support into Haiti. There's been a debate, and there is an ongoing debate at the Security Council to transform the MSS led by Kenya and to turn it into a full peacekeeping operation. The debate is ongoing. We don't really know where it's going, but the debate is open. It's probably one of the options on the table. But I really believe that if we don't have a proper strategy and a proper commitment on the long run, we won't be able to solve the crisis. And we need, again, like a strategy that takes in humanitarian crisis, security crisis, justice crisis, and places at the core of our strategy and our mission the specific case of Haiti and the specific challenge of dealing with organized crime groups, illicit networks that tie criminal groups with their political and economic bosses. And we're actually not very good at solving those crises, to be honest. We're not very good at dismantling, corruption or cutting ties between criminal groups and their backers. So unfortunately, the system that sustains and maintains violence in Haiti is still very much in place, and we haven't done enough to dismantle it.
A bleak picture for Haiti, unfortunately, but thank you for sitting down with me to help listeners understand Haiti's security crisis a little bit better. That was Romain Le Cour Grandmaison, a senior expert with the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. Thank you, Romain.
Thank you very much.
And this is Common Ground. My name is Sonja Wolf. Until next time, thank you.